Welcome to Otto's Garage. Hi, so let's have a look at that rear diff and see how that's getting on. Here's the diff, so I've degreased it and I've now just been over it with some standard thinners just to get all those last little bits of grime and stuff off it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give it a spray with some heat resistant aluminium basically, so that should make it look nice and shiny. There's no leaks on it anywhere, so all of the gaskets are good on it. There's nothing coming out of any of the bearing ones, so I'm just going to leave well alone. At the moment there's no oil in that, but obviously that will get filled up afterwards, so I'll get that painted up and we'll see what she looks like. Right, that's what we've used on it. So obviously we're not going to get anything like the heat that that's saying on there, but at least we're not going to get, if it does get a bit hot, it's not just going to peel off, hopefully. So I've got to do that in a few coats, but that is looking fairly sharp. I like that. And that's cleaned her up no end. So that should be good, and that should keep it nice and clean looking for a while. So I'll give that another couple of coats. When that one's gone off, we'll just keep flicking her over. I'll get to the underside of it, and then she's going to be ready to go back on the car. Okay, so these are the Polyflex bushes with the guide as well, and they're basically going to sit into the carrier like that basically, so we can get those bolted up. What I'll do is I'll position the diff underneath it first, and then we can drop all those in there and drop the whole of the cradle straight away over the top, and then I can bolt through the carrier bushes down into the diff afterwards. So that's the cradle located over the top of the diff. Basically all we need to do now then is just put the other side of the bush that goes over there and just sets down, and then it'll have a washer on the top of it, and then we'll bolt straight the way through, and we've got captivated nuts in on the underside of the diff. I'll just see if I can get a picture in under there. So basically where you've got that little channel here, there's a captivated nut that slots in there, and then the bolt drives straight the way down through into that captivated nut position underneath. So I'll get those put in there and I'll just get a picture of that for you. Right, so there we can see the bolt going through the bush, through the bush carrier into the cradle, and then we've got that locking nut down there underneath. So we're all good to go now. That's all tightened up, and it crushes down onto the crush tubes which are located in the bush. So you can't just keep squashing it basically. It hits the crush tube and then they bottom out. Right, so just looking at this diff housing here, which has gone on nicely, don't get me wrong, that looks okay. What I would say though is that on the back of it, I'm just going to tip that up a little bit, you can see the drain plug there on the diff, and basically you're not going to have enough clearance to get that plug out of the back there. So it might flex a little bit to remove it, but you know, once it's all in the car and fitted up to the drive shafts, that's going to be quite tricky to do. So I think if the diff does need draining out in the future, it'll be a drop the diff off job. But again, that's a once in a blue moon thing. It's not like draining engine oil. The beauty I've got now is that although she's all fitted in there, you know, it's all bolted up now, the plug's in, I've got a fillet on the side, and I can get to the side one, which is down there. So when I come to fill it, that should be okay, but I'll do that sooner rather than later, certainly I think before I put all the drive shafts on and everything. So just something to bear in mind, that when I come to drain it out, I'll have to probably drop the diff, but for filling her up now, that should be okay to go on in place. So I'm counting my blessings there. I didn't really want to take the damn thing apart again. Okay, so what I've done now is I've just got the trolley jack in underneath the bottom of the diff there, and then I've basically just lifted the whole housing up all in one go, and then all I need to do then is just tighten the bolts up at each end, and I can drop the trolley jack out and bingo, she's in. So two other parts that I've got, basically these are diff carrier braces, so they're going to run from the diff at one end, or from the carrier at one end where the front suspension arm bolts onto the diff carrier, and then at the other end they're going to travel forwards to where the trailing arm goes. So basically it's going to run from this point on the diff here diagonally across to that front trailing arm bolt at that position. Now, ordinarily, if you've got a standard road car, you can't fit those because obviously there's a fuel tank that goes in under there. But because the fuel tank on this is going up in the boot, we've gained a bit of space on that. So the idea behind that is just to give a bit of lateral restraint to stop this diff carrier moving fore and aft on there. So they're all going to go on. I'll get some pictures of that when it's on and we can see what she looks like. Right, so I've assembled the wishbone back together now. Basically, if you have a look in the it's a thing with paper in it. It's got ink on it. It's a book. It's a book. A book. Okay, I've assembled the wishbone back together now at the front here and put on the suspension arm. So you've got your poly bush going in this end, and your poly bush going in this end, and then obviously there's the ball joint which goes in the bottom of the shock absorber, or the bottom of the hub I should say in this instance. So I've used new bolts and everything on everything, and what I've done is, if you have a look in the workshop manual, it'll tell you the correct torque settings, because obviously these need to be done up correctly on that. On the back side of it you can see where the holes are, where we've been able to get through to access those. There was one hole which didn't quite align, and I've just ground a bit of that out of there, of this reinforcing plate, so there's nothing structural that's a problem with that. It's just so we could get a socket in to get onto that nut there. And then basically, yeah, she's all ready to go. So the next job really is to get some of the poly bushes on the car, and then we can mount that on the bottom of the car. Happy days. Okay, here's a top tip for you. Go and have a Chinese, eat it of course, do the washing up, have a bit of a beer maybe, but then when you get those little plastic tubs that all the food comes in, just hang on to those. And this is the kind of thing I'm talking about, these little things here. So these are absolutely great when you need all those bolts for putting your project together. You can basically get them all in there, and you can mark up where all of your different size nuts and washers and bolts and everything are, and then it makes it a damn sight easier when you're looking for that correct size to come and grab it and stick it on the car. So just a little tip for you there, well worth the effort. Right, next job. So the front lower wishbone is held in by a bush, which is fixed onto the front plate, which has got a towing eye on it, and that bolts up to the chassis rail. The back of the wishbone, that is fixed into this little chappy, which basically bolts to the underside of the bulkhead in that kind of position there. This bush has been driven out, the original one, and I want to put a poly bush in there. So what I've got to do is I've got to separate these two plates, which are kind of riveted together. You can see that. So what we're going to do is, we have mounted one in the vise here, and we're going to drill out these two little rivets, and then hopefully that should split the two in half, and then I can put the new poly bush in between them, and then when we bolt them back up together, that'll close it all up again. So let's just have a quick look at that and see how we get on. So we've got a chisel in there and just get in between the two, and then if we give that a little tap, it should just pop it loose. Happy days. So now it's been split apart, you can see how, as if by magic, the bush sits in there, and then this plate will go back on it again. That hangs under the car, and then basically when it's bolted up to the chassis, or the underside of the body there, it will it'll squeeze all that in together, so that'll close up all those gaps on it. Right, just fitted the wishbone now. So basically you can see the front poly bush there into the bracket with the towing eye on it, and then there's the back poly bush there in that rear one. All I've got to do now basically is take the ball joint here, and that's got to be located in the bottom of the hub at that point, or the hub carrier I should say. And then we can get a bolt through that end there, that'll retain it, and then she's in place. There's obviously the thing that I haven't got on at the moment is the anti-roll bar which goes into here. There's a bush there, and then that fires across the back of the engine bay there. But let's get that bolted up. I'll have to probably pull a G-clamp over here and just pull that in. I don't really want to put a driver in the back there. You can see where they've got the split there, because it'll just damage the powder coating I've got on it. So it should just pull up with a G-clamp on there, close up, and then I can put a bolt in there. Right, that's it, it's in. I did have to get a chisel in there and just ease that apart. It was just too tight. The clamp wouldn't, the G-clamp wouldn't pull it in. So I just opened that up there with the chisel a bit, and then we slid her up and got a retaining bolt in there. So now the job's a good one. That's pretty. So I'm trying to put the front suspension plate on here, and that bolts up to the underside of the front cross member. But of course what's happened is that when I've painted it and I put that Gravitex on and all that kind of stuff as well, the threads in the body under that cross member have become somewhat blocked. They're not damaged, but they've got all sorts of paint and stuff in them. And it's these ones down here that I'm talking about. So where you've got these holes here, they're all factory threaded. And when you come to put the bolt in there, it just doesn't want to go in. So top tool tip for you here. What you need to do is get yourself one of these sets here. So this is a tap and die set, and then the basically you've got the die here which is going inside, and this basically is a threaded, you can see it there, it's a threaded cutter which basically will go into the existing factory threads and it'll clean them out. Great bit of kit this. It's an M10 by 125, that is, and the 125 is the pitch of the metric pitch of the, you know, measured basically as you run up and down the threads there, the spiral in effect. What you tend to find with a lot of automotive vehicles, they have metric, what they call metric fine threads. That's the 1.25 pitch on them. And a lot of hardware shops will just do 1.5. So if you go to the hardware shop to find the correct bolts, they don't always fit into the car. Anyway, the easiest solution was to get a tap and die set. It wasn't expensive. I think this is about 30 quid off our good old friend Eric Bay. And it's got both taps and dies in it, so we can do the outside and the inside of the threads as well. So what I've done is I've just passed one of those up under the bodywork there, clean out the thread, and presto, the bolt should go straight into it. So that's going to save a lot of messing around. And of course what you don't want to do is strip those threads in the body, because they'll be a nightmare to replace. So we can now progress and get those parts fitted. So that's got the tap located in there, and all we need to do now is just basically spin that around and it'll just follow the thread that was obviously the original thread. But what it's doing is it's just cleaning it out. Every so often it's a good idea just to go backwards and then go forwards again, and that just loosens up any of the old paint or the rust even that might be in there that's accumulated after it was dipped in the tank. So when that's gone all the way in, we should be able to take her out, and then we should find that the bolt will go in there nicely. I can feel that's quite a lot freer now, which is a good thing. And like I say, you don't want to strip out those threads in there, because they're obviously captivated nuts within the cross member. So when that's out, we should be able to get our bolt in. Okay, so that's out. Let's just offer up a bolt and just see what she's like. And I think that is going to go in there, a Boster. Yeah, so you can see now that's really easy to wind in, and all I'll do is I'll put a bit of copper ease on the thread, and then we can just mount that up and get the bracket fixed back to it. So there we are. Managed to get the front suspension all sorted on both sides. So we've got the tie bar, we've got the bottom wishbone which we reinforced, new ball joint, and then the BC coilover going up there. Yeah, so very pleased with that. The other side's all done as well, you can see that over there. So the next thing that I'm going to be looking at is going to be the steering rack. I need to get the steering rack done. That's definitely going to need a bit of paint on it, but I'll have to strip the old bits off it, clean her up, and we'll get that on. If we can get the steering rack on it, that means we've got obviously steering on the front. So then she's going to be ready for some brakes and some wheels to get on there. Happy days. Right, here's a quick one for you. Lad's got himself a Mito Turbo. Nice little car that, pretty quick. Just got to pass his test now, hasn't he? Anyway, we're just taking it out for a couple of pics. Just see what he's like. Happy days. He can't wait to pass his test.